Hi everyone, thanks for the opportunity to provide this overview at this workshop, and thanks to the organisers for bringing everybody together. CMIP's an important project and it's really good to see the climate science community from all institutions, etc., and also government coming together today. So now I hope that I've met the brief, because this talk is actually going to provide a very high level quick overview of WCRP, the World Climate Research Programme. CMIP is a project within WCRP, and so I'm going to provide some sort of context about who and what WCRP are, and then Julie will provide, I hope, some more detail about CMIP, although Julie and I haven't talked to each other, so I hope that we do connect. It'll be pretty brief. I've put web links as we've gone through in case there's something more that you want to know, but I actually suspect, looking at you all here at Aspendale and on the screen, many of you probably know a great deal about what I'm already going to say. So, for over 40 years, the World Climate Research Programme has coordinated climate science around the world to advance our understanding of the Earth's climate system. And when it was first started back in 1980-ish, it really focused on two questions, which was, to what extent can we predict the climate, and what is the extent of humans' influence on climate? And arguably, we've kind of answered at least one of those questions. We're still working on the other. We continue to lead and coordinate science questions, science activities around the dynamic coupled climate system. But the key thing about WCRP is that our focus is on these things that are too large and too complex to be tackled by any single nation, even any single scientific discipline, and certainly any single institution. So the point is that it takes a world climate research program to advance that science. We launched our new strategic plan in around 2019, and that coincided with our 40th anniversary, and we took that as an opportunity to talk about how WCRP was evolving. It will continue to pursue fundamental climate science questions, but we also wanted to indicate that it's evolving to advance to develop ways to better bridge the connections between climate science and society, so that we are delivering that climate knowledge and climate information that is useful and usable. So this slide here, first of all, importantly, what is our purpose? What's our mission? It is around coordination and facilitation of international climate science. And I really just want to highlight the 4 scientific objectives. You'll see there the 3 that you would expect, but the 4th really comes to this point about bridging climate science and societies. And we know that to do that, we're going to need new science, new technologies, and new ways of co-designing knowledge. With this goal of providing climate knowledge and information, this slide just is a schematic to really give a sense of the scope of our science. And you're all very familiar with IPCC, so if you think about the scope of Working Group 1 science, that's WCRP. But just to say that, we've, over the 40 years, worked on observations and modelling, new work and ongoing work on not just predicting, but attributing changes that we're seeing in the Earth system, through to quantifying the cycles and budgets for annual stock takes, and that's in collaboration with others, of course, developing the ability to provide future climate information projections. This is where CMIP comes in, round to assessing risks and extremes and tipping points, and actually including what are the likely or possible consequences if we intervene in the climate system. So that's a bit of a sense of the scope. It's really important that I point out that WCRP coordinates and facilitates climate science around the world, but we don't provide funding. And what that means is that it's really critical for our program, this global program, to be strong on engagement, coordination and collaboration, and the sorts of things that means that we do. And I put this slide in because people often think, well, what do you do if you're not providing funding? That means that we might lead and coordinate big experiments, and you'll see some examples. They might be modelling experiments, they might be observational. We might work with other agencies to identify research priorities, work with funders, and importantly, periodically do scientific assessments, reviews and syntheses. So I make that point that that's the role that WCRP plays. I think when Andy invited me along to talk today, one of the things that he said to talk about was how we're organised, our structure. Structure charts are pretty boring, but the point of putting one up is you've probably all heard about some things that sit within WCRP, but you might not be sure about where it fits. And that's the point of this slide. So at the top here, we have 3 co-sponsors, the WMO, the International Science Council, ISC, and UNESCO's Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission. From a governance perspective, there's an overarching committee, which I have been on until just recently, and a secretariat mostly based in Geneva, but there are staff from elsewhere who support all activities within WCRP. The foundation, the core of WCRP are our 6 core projects. This is where researchers from around the world come together to work on shared science goals. They are loosely organised around the domains of the Earth system, obviously, and they kind of represent homes, really, where these disciplinary areas, the people involved in those disciplines, come together to advance the science, and it's a way of ensuring that those capabilities endure as well. Those projects include process studies, observational studies, modelling, etc., and they're all supported by project officers. And on the right-hand side there, I'm not going to go through the list, but these again are the sorts of things that you'll see these core projects do. And then I can't forget to mention, I'm going to come back to our new lighthouse activities. Part of implementing our new strategy was to establish these 5 lighthouse activities which were intended to focus on areas that were a high priority and needed rapid progress to be made. I'll come back to them. So the 4 core projects, which many of you will know about, they've been part of the WCRP since the 1990s. CLIVAR for oceans, GWEX for land and atmosphere, CLIC for the cryosphere, and SPARK for the atmosphere. They are continuing in the new strategic plan of WCRP, but we introduced or established 2 new core projects with our new strategic plan. They actually continue work that was already being done, but they will bring in some new work as well. So ESMO, the Earth System Modelling and Observations, continues the strong work on modelling and observations, but with a focus on models and observations, models and data together. The Working Group on Coupled Modelling, which is where CMIP sits, is part of ESMO. And the new Regional Information for Society is really wanting to focus more on the provision and what's needed to provide societally relevant information for regions. It's where Cordex sits. So 6 core projects and 5 lighthouse activities. As I said, they were intended to make progress where progress needed to be made. I don't want to take time to go through each of them in detail. I can answer questions, but you get a sense from these thumbnail descriptions of what these lighthouse activities are about. Safe landing climates, routes to climate-safe landing spaces, my climate risk, taking a user perspective, not starting from the top down, but starting from what users need. How can we assess and explain climate risk? There's a hub and my climate risk being established at the Bureau, I do believe. Explaining and predicting Earth system change is pretty self-explanatory. Digital Earth, Christian Jacob's in the room, he's one of the co-leads for that. Developing a digital representation of the Earth system, combining models and observations. And lastly, the Academy. The key point about the lighthouse activities and the core projects, so this is the graphic I just want you to focus on for the moment. These are the core projects, these are the lighthouses, they mesh with each other. These lighthouse activities draw on the expertise and capabilities that sit in the core projects. I hope that makes sense. So the other thing to say is that when we did an assessment about, well, what's the critical science about 3 or 4 years ago, we came up with this wonderful, awesome bubble diagram, which you can take a look at. But the real point for today is that there were 3 areas that we felt needed some focus. One around geoengineering, which we're now calling climate intervention, following the lead of the US National Academy. We wanted to be clear that we actually do work on extremes, and we were realised that this work on how the cycles and stores of heat, carbon and water interact with each other and how they change with changing climate was important as well. So just for now to say that we've got some task teams developing some science plans about what we will do with these areas and where they will fit within the WCRP. So I'm being told to wrap up, so I better go fast. CMIP, I wanted to, obviously this is a CMIP workshop and Melita has already described the purpose of CMIP. I just wanted to make the point that CMIP is one of the most high impact projects within WCRP. It was originally, its original goal as explained by Melita, and it's there to advance scientific understanding as well as support model development, as well as support policy making, and it's played a really critical role in all of the IPCC assessment reports, both in terms of the model data and also the scientific publications. And I just can't emphasise, even though we will have lively and robust discussions about CMIP and how it should go into the future and what its purpose is, I just want to really emphasise that despite some of its challenges, it's been incredibly important across these different dimensions of advancing our scientific understanding, providing information that's used for regional projections and supporting policy assessments that work like the IPCC underpins. And I'd say the same thing about Cordex. We're not talking about Cordex today, but it's also played a really important role, sort of as one of these service-oriented flagship activities, if you will. So just in the last 10 seconds that I've got, I'm going to be a bit cheeky, I wanted to take an extra few seconds of your time to do a plug for our Open Science Conference at the end of this year, Advancing Climate Science for a Sustainable Future. We hope you can join us either in person or virtually from anywhere in the world. I just make the point that Kigali in Rwanda feels like a long way away. To get there takes about the same amount of time as it takes to get to Paris. So if you're thinking of going to the EGU, well, it's not too different to go to Kigali and the cost is about the same. We're well advanced in our organising. I'm not expecting you to read these lists. These are the 3 themes: advances in climate research, human interactions with climate, co-produced climate services and solutions. We have 40 sessions that are being designed as we speak. And the abstract submission has been extended to the middle of March. So we hope to see you either virtually or in person at the Open Science Conference. Thanks, Melita.